May I call the second session to order? What do they call it? Arms, the guy in Congress? Someone at arms. Donald, Sergeant at arms, please bring this forum. Sergeant at arms, that would be Grace. Where's that beautiful image of the globe? Anyway. Oh, that's your last slide. Oh, thank you, Donald, because I work in Thailand, and that was the center of that globe, and the center of India, China is right there in that globe. No, please don't go up there. You want to see each other's presentations, I'm sure. You can I ask the panelists to remain in your seats because you'll be more comfortable looking at the presentation from your seats. And when I introduce you, you can come up and give your talk and then go back to the seat. And then after the end of the speakers, I'll invite everybody to come up and the respondents will be introduced and give their response. So it's an architect taking charge a little bit differently here. I'm Brian McGrath. I am an architect, so I'm in the School of Constructed Environments here at Parsons, the New School for Design. I am also an incredible beneficiary of the India-China Institute, having been a member of the first cohort, where the topic was urbanization and globalization. And I think it's been a wonderful experience. I still work with the cohort there, and with each added cohort, I have a new group of friends across India, China. And so I really want to commend Ashok and everyone around India-China Institute, all their supports, for creating something unique in the world, because now we have 50 scholars, India-China New School, who have been closely working together at least 2 years, some of us 6 years. And so I think that's an incredible intellectual resource that we hope to put forward in the future of India-China Institute. So stay tuned. Much more interesting things to come. The other thing I wanted to tell you is at the New School, because I am from Parsons, and we really like to be part of these incredibly important discussions about globalization, urbanization, environmentalism, sustainability, poverty and inequality. And so I really think I'd like to share with you the recent one sentence from the New School's renewed vision. And because innovation comes from, of course, the Latin nova, which means renew. And we are the New School, and we're kind of old, so we do need to renew. So our renewed vision is we are and will be a university where design and social research drive approaches to studying the issues of our time, such as democracy, urbanization, technological change, economic empowerment, environment, and sustainability, as well as migration. So this is one of the sentences. You can find the longer mission statement, vision statement online. And that's what's bringing together the great social research at the New School with this tremendous, vibrant, innovative design school called Parsons. So welcome to the last session on innovation. This session, we are, and again, like Sanjay before me, I invite you to read the full biographies in the handout, and I'll just give a short introduction to each presenter and invite them to the stage. So Jayanta Bandyopadhyay is the first speaker, and he's from the Indian Institute of Management, and he's going to talk about situating social innovation for sustainable environments, and give you a hint at how this group, this cohort, has been working, and some of the topics they'll be discussing. Jayanta, please. Right here. You can speak your. I'm going to sit and watch you.
Right. I'm just giving a short intro. Good afternoon. Mine is a short introduction to the detailed presentations that 4 members of the cohort 3 will be making here. We thought that the 4 presentations, and there is a 5th one, which belongs to my work, but it is not being presented here. But next week on Tuesday, there is a public lecture about which some announcements have been made, and there is a poster around. So there are in total 5 presentations related to the overall topic of social innovation for sustainable environments in China and India. My role here is to give the unifying framework for the diverse presentations on diverse locations and topics that were based on the specific competence and interest of the 6 cohort members. In this cohort, which is constituted by 6 scholars, 2 from China, 2 from India, and 2 from the New School, USA. You have their names. From China, Professor Dongshi Kui. The second cohort member from China is unfortunately Mr. Seping, tied up with family responsibilities back home and is not able to come here to make the presentation. The 2 cohort members from India are Professor Sanjay Chaturvedi and myself, and from the New School, Professor Victoria Marshall and Professor Nidhi Srinivas. So we have 4 presentations coming up on this particular issue of the social innovation for environmental sustainable environments in China and India. Now, the task of identifying social innovations in these 2 countries, characterized by very large population, and this large population has quite a bit of growing material expectations from future, and the countries are on the path of very rapid economic growth, to the extent of ranging from 7% to 10% in various years, slowing down a little bit in the recent 1 or 2 years, but maximum had been about 9% for India, 10% for China, which is a tremendously large economic sort of output. And like all economic outputs, they have inputs and what can be said as unwanted products being pushed into as pollutants in the water, air, soil. So this is a tremendous challenge to conceptualize how to identify the processes of innovation in addressing the issues of environmental challenges in these 2 countries. So these 6 members had been spending, of course, they spent their last 2.5 years in their own research, of course, in their own home institutions, and there had been occasional meetings for mutual discourses, and these meetings led to a more concrete and more comprehensive understanding of what innovations might mean. And you will probably get the details from each of the presentations. In the short period I have, I can only say that in the dynamic framework, extremely dynamic framework of both social and economic and probably cultural, political, we found that social innovations are definitely very important tools to address either identification of environmental degradation issues or working towards environmental rehabilitation of degraded ecosystems. And these innovations are the result of a diverse inputs, diverse social consciousness. They are operating at various spatial levels as well as sectoral levels, and they are influenced by the political forces in the country, and in turn, they want to influence the political forces in the country. So all this makes the whole concept of innovation a very interdisciplinary, a very composite process, and hence it has diversity built in. It cannot be almost a singular process through which you can say, this is the starting point of innovation, this is the end point of all innovations. The innovations that we study are probably a very small, minute fraction of the total innovations that have been going on in these two countries with such large population and probably quite a creative population. You will see they are only indicative examples. 4 people probably in 2 years' time of, say, total amount of time devoted a few months. It is difficult to go into details of the representative nature of the innovations. They will be all scattered, identified one. But there has been quite a bit of intellectual process through which we arrived at this diversity as the basic character of social innovations for sustaining the natural environments. No, thank you. Now, having said that, and not having more of enough time, I quickly go into introducing what our cohort colleagues will be presenting. The first one by Professor Sanjay Chaturvedi will be addressing the forest movement in the Indian Himalaya, which also is well known by the name of Embrace the Tree movement or the Chipko Andolan. And it is seen as a representative, but quite a bit of micro-level innovation. The details will obviously come from him. The second presentation will be by Professor Dongshi Kui, who will be talking about how the communities in the high mountains in the Himalaya, in Nepal, in India, and in the Tibet Autonomous Region of China, they have been innovating to cope with and adapt to impacts of climate change. Again, I will not go into details. They will be coming from the speakers. Professor Nidhi Srinivas will be talking about innovations that non-governmental organizations in arid and semi-arid areas of China and India have been promoting to ensure better water availability. And Professor Victoria Marshall will be talking of an innovative urban design project, which is as a systematic process, and that is working on the general field of urban ecology. And as I said, there is another of these case studies on the water futures for China and India, which will not be presented by myself here, but on Tuesday there will be. I think there is sometime this announcement comes here. And with that, I complete my brief introduction because I think it is only the respective presenters who will give you more detailed description of the work done by the third cohort. Thank you very much.
Just to repeat, so I have the pleasure of introducing Sanjay Chaturvedi, who's the Nisi Fellow and from Punjab University, going to talk about struggles of innovation, the Chipko movement in retrospect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Professor Jayanto Bandhopadhyay, for having introduced the theme, and all of us. Thank you, India-China Institute, for having done me this honor for the last 2.5 years. It has been an enormously enriching experience. I owe so much of debt, intellectual debt, to my colleagues and to my fellow brothers, that it is very difficult to make this presentation and project it as my own. There has been a wonderful dialogue that has been going on for the last 2 years and more. We have met at various places. And I must say that this presentation that I'm making before you today is the result of this enormous churning of ideas and thoughts that has been going on. And having focused in my research on marine environments, looking at Sundarbans in case of India and Zhongshan Natural Reserve in case of China, I was struck by the insights that I received from, particularly from Professor Jayanto Bandhopadhyay in the course of my conversations with him. And I felt that looking at Chipko in retrospect, and also in terms of prospects, so please grant me the liberty of having added prospects to the theme of my presentation. I thought that would be an enormously enriching exercise, and because it's a work in progress, I will have this opportunity of inviting your insights and your comments. First of all, as you can see here, there is a bird, migratory bird. And the reason I have put this image is because Chipko has been very creatively imagined, and imaginations are so central to all kinds of innovations, particularly social innovations, as a migratory bird. And you would see that I have combined together the tropical forests and the oceans, because my interest, one of my major interests, has been in the oceans and in the polar regions. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, number one, that migratory bird is a very useful way of looking at social innovation, particularly Chipko movement. And secondly, geography matters in social innovation. Geographical landscapes do matter a great deal. I think I should also be very quickly sharing with you my ideas on what I mean by micro geopolitics. By micro geopolitics, I mean a socio-spatial strategy adopted by communities and groups located on the margins against the imposed maps of meaning on their universe. Paul Routledge would call it anti-geopolitics, which is an interesting concept, but I would prefer the word micro-geopolitics of resistance against various architectures of domination. And I will try to show through my presentation that Chipko, as Professor Guha also points out, Ramchandra Guha in his book, Unquiet Woods, has been a victim of its own success, in the sense that as the movement has been perceived, imagined, represented in official discourses, in popular framings, sometimes the real movers and the shapers of the movement have been pushed on the margins. And very different narratives have been attached to what Chipko was all about. And I think there are some very important lessons here which I will try to flag very quickly. Now let me start with the roots, because these are two conceptual tools I'm using: roots, R-O-O-T-S, and roots, R-O-U-T-S. And I think both are extremely important. Roots of Chipko are of philosophical nature. There are ideological moorings of what can be described as a very innovative resistance through Gandhian and Sarvodaya methods, basically non-violent resistance. Now, let me begin with this. The award speech, I quote Shri Sundarlal Bahuguna, who is seen here with his wife, with his very well-known quotation, which is, "Ecology is permanent economy." And please pay attention to the image, which is right below here, women of Garhwal carrying this, the fodder, grass on their backs. And I quote, "It must be admitted that to begin with, Chipko was an economic movement, and we looked upon forests as a source of employment through tree felling and providing raw material for industries. The long sufferings of hill women have guided the activists to reach new heights in their movement when these preserving mothers of the future generations dictated that forests were their maternal homes, which provided water, food, fodder, and fuel. Both the trees and the mothers teach that to live and also to be ready to die for the sake of others proves to be the real fountain of bliss. Thus came the famous slogan, "What do the forests bear? Soil, water, and pure air." Soil, water, and pure air are the basis of life. Now, Mr. Bahuguna himself admitted that to begin with, it was an economic movement. Ecological turns came much later. But it needs to be remembered that when Bahuguna was looking at ecology and economy, he was not looking at these two in terms of binary opposites. And I think this quotation, "ecology is permanent economy," says it all. Now, sometimes it is forgotten that some of the great philosophical contributions to the Chipko movement, embracing the trees movement, came from two wonderful visionary women. Meera Behan, Madeline Slade, as she was called, both were disciples of Mahatma Gandhi. And Meera Behan, I quote, she said, "Year after year, the floods in the north of India seem to be getting worse. And this year, they have been absolutely devastating. This means that there is something radically wrong in the Himalayas, and that something is without doubt connected with the forests. It is not, I believe, just a matter of deforestation, as some people think, but largely a matter of changes of species." So here was a micro observation of what was going on at the grassroots in the mountains of Garhwal. And see what she says in the second quotation. "The Banj brings them in no cash for the coffers of the government, whereas the cheer pine is very profitable, yielding as it does both timber and resins." And this statement again brings out very nicely the difference between livelihood geographies and the geopolitics or geoeconomics of profit and profit pursuits. Another very important inspiration of Chipko comes from what she was called daughter of the Himalayas by the local people, mother of social activism, one who was at the forefront of the anti-alcohol movement. "The principles that govern humanity are higher than those that govern the state," she said. "A centralized government indifferent to its people, it is a joke." So Sarla Behan and Meera Behan were very important contributors to the philosophy of Chipko sometime, and this fact has often been overlooked. Another person, who is unfortunately no more, was Ghanshyam Lal Raturi, who was also called Sailani. And please note that so much has been written and said about the symbolism of Chipko, which is embracing the tree. And I think here, it's a very deeper meaning of that embrace. He says, I quote, "Embrace the trees in the forest and save them from being felled, save the treasure of our mountains from being looted away from us," unquote. He also went to another site, and that is the spirit of Chipko, like a migratory bird, went to the Doon Valley, anti-mining exercises there, and he said, I quote, "A fight for truth has begun at Sinsaryu, Khala. A fight for rights has begun in Mulkot, Thano, Sister. It is a fight to protect our mountains and forests. They give us life. Hug the life of the living trees and streams to your hearts. Resist the digging of mountains which kills our forests and our streams. A fight for life has begun at Khala," unquote. Now, this cartoon is one of my favorites because it describes very aptly, very graphically, what has been called the victim of success. And the cartoon says they are not from Chipko movement. They are footboard travelers thrown out of the speeding buses at the turning. Now, unfortunately, there has been a lot of misreporting of this very important philosophical embracing of the trees. I quote Jayanto Bandyopadhyay, who wrote a fascinating article in Economic and Political Weekly long back. I quote, "A common impression exists all over the world, except in the villages of Garhwal and Kumaon, that large number of people, especially women, have been embracing trees to prevent their felling. While the media has played an important role in spreading the positive message of the movement, some journalists have failed miserably to maintain minimum professional standards, have created serious confusions at the international level on the above question," unquote. Now, there have been a lot of instances of this. If you look at Ramchandra Guha's book, towards the end of his analysis, he also comes out with various stories. One more recent one was published in The Guardian on 8th of March 2011, it said, when Vandana Shiva and women villagers wrapped their arms around trees to prevent them from being felled by commercial loggers, the name tree hugger was born. Since then, Shiva's influence on the global environmental movement has grown unquote. So I'm just using it as an example to show as to how some of the real movers and shapers of the movement came to be eclipsed. Now, let me show them some of them here. For example, Dhoom Singh Negi, Ghanshyam Raturi. They were the real movers and shapers, along with Gauri Devi, along with lots of commoners, whose names perhaps we even do not know. Because at one moment, Chipko became a part of the popular socio-spatial consciousness. And then when Sri Sundarlal Bahuguna undertook that Padyatra, foot march, from 81 to 83, it was about 2,800 kilometers from Kashmir to Kohima. Then the question that I would like to pose is, does the Himalayan Chipko Padyatra undertaken by Bahuguna qualify as innovation? If so, in what sense? If not, why not? It was not just walking barefoot or walking on foot all these huge distances. It was also about entering into a dialogic politics with the communities that he met, the people that he addressed. And this is how he created a very important movement of popular consciousness, which then facilitated this social innovation. Now, if Chipko is a migratory bird, and this is how I would like to see it, then please note, and I quote Panduranga Hegde, who is the leader of Apiko movement. And Apiko, let's see, he says, like a migratory bird, the Chipko ideology travels 2,500 kilometers from the Himalayas, crossing the central India and routes on the west coast and the western Ghats in South India. It got a different name with the same tone, known as Apiko, meaning hug the trees in Kannada language. Now, there are three philosophies of Apiko. One is Ulisu, which means to save. And he talks about 5F philosophy to establish ecological health of the soil and the people and the wildlife. Look at the systemic perspective that Apiko takes. And these 5 species are frit, fodder, fuel wood, fertilizer, and fiber. Belasu, to grow. And Balasu, rational use of forest resources. So the spread of Apiko movement, and also particularly in Uttar Kannada, which is supposed to be, or which is, one of the top 15 biodiversity hotspots in the world. These were the special features of this movement, Apiko. Number one, decentralized movement led by local activists. Mobilization of local resources and close collaboration among a small core group of coordinators. Wise use of media, especially vernacular media, to popularize the movement. And the villagers invited Mr. Sundarlal Bahuguna to come and undertake another foot march in that locality in order to create a normative basis of a pragmatic geopolitics. So the kind of micro-geopolitics that you see here is both normative and pragmatic. And then it led to this widespread acceptance in popular academic imagination. Now, what were the demands of this very important second version of social innovation? Stop the clear felling of the natural forests, halt the monoculture plantation of single species, withdraw concessions given to forest-based industries, moratorium on felling of green trees in the forest regions of Western Ghats, change the forest policy from commercial objectives to ecological objectives with emphasis on the protection of the natural forests for water security and food security, which are very important components of livelihood security. And what was the outcome? Outcome was considerable success. Moratorium on felling of green trees was accepted by the government. Concessions were withdrawn that were earlier given to forest-based industries. There was a noticeable change in the forest policies in favor of ecological principles. Now, the question that arises is that if it was a success, then could that success be sustained? The answer is that in the words of Mr. Hegde, these are some of the questions that he has raised in some of his more recent correspondence with me. Will the movement fizzle out due to the absence of a second-line leadership? How conducive is the current social situation in India to launch movements of any kind for any public good? What are the implications of excessive role of media consumer culture and attraction of urban way of living for social struggles aiming at innovation. Please note these are the anti-innovation factors and forces which are operating in different contexts that we are faced with. And then he says, have the moments like Apiko lost their relevance? Has it become a legend that is incorporated in textbooks in schools rather than to be followed in everyday life? Now there is another example where Chipko movement again traveled like a migratory bird. And this is about Beej Bachao Andolan, Save the Seeds movement, which is a resistance movement against genetically modified crops. Now, you have Vijay Jardari, who has been at the forefront of this movement. You have Dhoom Singh Negi, who was a very important figure in Chipko movement, who now comes to this new site of challenge, new site of domination, new architecture of domination, and says there was no trade in seeds. Our brides brought seeds with them, and when they went back home on visits, they took with them seeds from here. In this way, seeds were exchanged. So again, you have here a clash of various understandings of development, or as we will call it in Hindi, vikas. Now, my last point is that if Chipko is a migratory bird, there is no reason why this migratory bird would not travel across the Himalayas, in China, across China, through the South China Sea, and through the oceans. So if you look for Chipko in marine environments, I'll give you one example. And before that, let me quote James C. Scott, Weapons of the Weak. He says, most subordinate classes throughout most of history have been rarely afforded the luxury of open, organized political activity. But as fast as millions of enthison polyps create willy-nilly a coral reef, so do the multitude of peasant insubordination and evasion create barrier reefs of their own, unquote. And I think this is where Professor Janto Bandyopadhyay very rightly said that there are thousands of innovations. In fact, in Uttar Kannada, there are thousands of such struggles for innovation which are going on, but they do not become as visible as Chipko did for some very good reasons. Now, is this not social innovation for resistance at sea? And I quote here John Kurian, the time is very less, so I will very quickly just draw your attention to what's going on. He talks about the state of Kerala, where small-scale community-based fisher folk initiated collective action to invest in rejuvenating the natural assets of the sea that had been destroyed by the incessant fishing operations of large-scale bottom trawlers in the region. Please it might be reminded of that wonderful quotation by James C. Scott, and see what these communities did as a strategy of resistance. What they did, they went about erecting artificial reefs at the sea bottom in coastal waters to create anthropogenic marine environments. Reefs act as fish refugia and become source of food for them, as the structures are soon covered with bottom-dwelling biomass. Artificial reefs placed in strategic positions in the coastal waters can in time increase the overall biomass and the fish stock in the local ecosystem. Please note, an unintended side effect of sufficiently large artificial reefs is that they act as a barriers to the operation of bottom trawl nets, effectively performing the role of a sea bottom fence against incursions of trawlers into coastal waters. And I think that is a very fascinating example of how both the intended and unintended effects of a creative social innovation for resistance works at different levels. I conclude with these. Firstly, I want to argue and conclude that once liberated from various myths and meta-narratives that have evolved around it over a long period of time, the Chipko has a number of valuable insights to offer for those engaged in pursuit of innovation, both at a theoretical conceptual level and in terms of practices of resistance. The ongoing moments such as Apiko and the examples that I've given from Kerala are good examples of how the spirit of resistance embodied by the Chipko continues to take new forms, agendas, and challenges in different geographical contexts. It shows the critical importance of political engagements in the wake of attempts to push such movements into a post-political phase. What the climate change discourse is doing is precisely this. When you frame forests as the lungs of the planet Earth, as carbon sinks, sometimes you empty out the forests of this very important component of human, cultural, and political geographies. And the question which I would also like to ask is this: who decides whether a particular innovation is liberating, emancipatory, or subjugating, dominating? Is innovation a means or an end, especially for those engaged in resistance against the geopolitics of domination? Does the Himalayan Chipko Padyatra undertaken by Bhagun, as I've already said, qualify as an innovation? If so, in what sense? If not, why not? Are there losers and winners in various instances of social innovation? Because in the case of Chipko, social contractors certainly lost. But whether the winners will stay winners in the long run, given the changing context, the neoliberal context, dispossession through accumulation, I mean, I'm borrowing again from David Harvey's work, is a billion-dollar question in my view. Finally, I would say, we also need a conceptual innovation. And when I was going through Gandhiji's following quotation, I thought that can we replace scales with circles? And if we replace scales with circles, particularly oceanic circles, does it create a new imagination and new intellectual space for various kinds of social innovations, not only in India, but also in China, where Judith Shapiro's work and other works that we have seen, not very many, unfortunately, have shown as to how new spaces for social resistance are opening up. Even if they are fractured, there are spaces where we can find, even if nascent, social protests and movements, or potential movements. And Gandhiji says, life will not be a pyramid with the apex sustained by the bottom, but it will be an oceanic circle whose center will be the individual, always ready to perish for the village, the latter ready to perish for the circle of villages, till at last the whole becomes one life composed of individuals, never aggressive in their arrogance, but ever humble, sharing the majesty of the oceanic circle of which they are integral units, unquote. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jayanti. The coral of innovation and the oceanic circles, I think, are beautiful images to take with us. Next, we have Dong Shikui from Beijing Normal University, our EC Fellow, to talk about adaptive management for sustainable resource use.
Thank you very much, Brian, for your introduction. Also, thank you very much, Janta, for your brief introduction on my talk. Actually, my talk is very much related to yesterday's two presenter talk. One is from Professor Bawa, one is from Professor Lu Zhi. So today I would also focusing on grassroots level of social innovation, more broadly also extend to maybe technical innovation as well. So before starting my talk, I would like to tell you a little bit story about myself. Actually, I was trained as a pure grassland ecologist when I was in college. But when I worked with the pastoral community in Qinghai Tibetan Plateau to do some kind of restoration project on degraded grassland and do kind of research on how to cope with climate change, the local herders asked me, can you bring rainfall for me? Because in recent years, we are facing very much problem of shortage of water. So I was stuck. And then I told them how to adjust the stocking rate on the grassland. He said, oh, I know the carrying capacity, but how can I support my family without, let's say, yak and sheep? So I realized that I needed to do some study on the social perspective as well. So now I do kind of a coupled system by bringing interdisciplinary kind of approach, which is called coupled social ecological study. So today I will bring some of my study in Himalaya region from Nepal, India to China. So this is just a kind of outline. I will talk a little about how, in terms of resource use, I will focus grassland because I'm trained as a grassland scientist. And also I will talk a little bit on what's the effect of global change and what's the impact of these changes and how local adaptation, what are local adaptations there, and what's a strategy that we should take care to enhance this kind of adaptive management. So yesterday, actually, Professor Baba already gave you very concrete view about the Himalaya region. Actually, in terms of azimuth, actually, when we talk about the Himalaya, azimuth extends the whole Himalaya region into western part to Afghanistan, and also to northern part towards the end of the Qinghai-Tibetan Plateau. So I would like to say this particular unit is very, very important in terms of geological location, also kind of role ecosystem services they playing. So totally there are around 4.3 million of hectares of area, and which support around 150 million of people living upstream and 3 times more at the downstream, sorry. And when we look at the land use cover in this particular area, over 50% of this land were covered by grassland. So you can imagine how important grassland is in this area. So grassland is not only kind of resources here, but also it's kind of landscape and ecosystem, which is play very important role. Like we have very beautiful landscapes in Lantang, Nepal, and Qiantang in China, Tibetan side, and Nachu, as well as Yushu and Golo, which is called 3-head water area. So when we look at the ecosystem million assessment, so normally the defined the ecosystem provide 4 kinds of services to human beings by supporting, provisioning, regulating, and culture. When we look at the grassland here, we found the grassland definitely provide all these kind of services for human beings, like provisioning. Yesterday, Professor Baba already mentioned, like a lot of fiber, food, fuel, minerals, timbers, non-timber forestry products, fresh water, and also a lot of flora and fauna there. And in terms of culture, you can imagine many ethnic groups living in this particular area, like the Daman people in Nepal and the Tibetan people in China. A lot of them are doing either pastoralists or semi-pastoralists there. So in terms of cultural perspective, there's very much diverse ethnic group, religion, linguistic, cultural diversity associated with unique tradition along history. So regulation, of course, it's not only regulate the water balance upstream, but also downstream. A lot of Himalaya water were holding by grassland in high altitude and discharged step by step to lowland to, let's say, Bangladesh and Western Bengal in India, and also some other regions. So downstream people depend on this kind of water to do kind of agricultural production and also other kind of activities as well. So, but nowadays, this kind of ecosystem resources face very much problem of degradation due to kind of global change. Let's say yesterday some people asked what's the drivers behind the grassland degradation. I would like to say there are multiple drivers. Let's see what are they. Look, here in terms of global change, yesterday Professor Baba said that warming, we did a very, it's not me, but other scientists who are doing the climate change. They found that clearly shows in the particular site that the warming is there. Particularly some, just like similar to Baba's finding that 1.5 degree increase there. But in some other places, people did interview on the local herd. They said in some years there's an extremely cold winter. So there's, a lot of variations and variability and uncertainty in terms of climate temperature. Also in terms of water issue, the precipitation, there's a yearly variation and a seasonal variation, very much dynamic nowadays. I mean, local people said that there's much more kind of uncertainty than before. And also kind of glacier melting, which of course influenced grassland a lot, because when you look at the topography, the glacier melting, then the water comes first to the grassland and feeds the grassland may hold in some water. And if there's no good health grassland, the runoff will be increased, so there's not enough water there to support this kind of ecosystem there. And of course, there's kind of population growth, and also livestock population growth as well. Some people did, FAO did a very good study in a county which is based in Qinghai province, and they found that since 1950s, there's a tremendous increase of both human population and livestock population. So it's a kind of tripled even during that period. I would like to mention in terms of livestock population increase after 1980s. There's a policy in China actually which is called grassland individualization or privatization policy, which mentioned by Professor Lu Zhi yesterday. Actually, when China government did the kind of individualization of grassland, first in early 1980s, they individualized the livestock first. So that means a lot of communal livestock were distributed into individual households. After 10 years, 1990s, they individualized the grassland. So within these 10 years, what's happening? I would like to say there's a kind of a tragedy of compound resources happening, because more and more people want communal grassland grazing. So that period is really, very much related to the policy driven. So here I would like to say, in terms of policy perspective, we have kind of a policy which is grassland individualization. Also, Professor Lu Zhi mentioned yesterday about fencing, grassland ban, which influenced a lot on the grassland ecosystem. So also kind of a global land use, land cover change based on kind of photo monitoring study. This is a very cool study done by American scientists, photographer. So actually, Professor Li Bo know more about this, because he worked with this guy, Joseph Rock, closely. What he found is, here you can find, he did a very good photo in, let's say, 100 years ago in Burma Pass. We can clearly see here is a tree line, which means above this area is grassland. But after 80 years later, the grassland disappeared, moved to tree line moved up. Why? Because there may be two kind of driving forces behind. One may be climate change due to climate warming, maybe tree line increase. Another point is actually there's a logging ban since 1970s or 80s. So trees were not allowed to cut down. And also local traditional use of grassland was changed to the fire. Actually, local people do fire to control the shrubs, but now which is banned, so shrub increase day by day, which occupied a lot of grassland. So this kind of change there. So also kind of development, which is like the railway built, Tibetan railway built along this area, destroyed a lot of land there. And of course, traditional livelihood kind of changed, modern machinery there. So this kind of change happening there. So what's the impact of this kind of change? Let's see. Grassland degradation is very much a big issue there due to this kind of influence. Let's see, since the 1980s to 1990s, there's the degraded grassland increased in several, let's say, provinces in Qinghai Tibetan Plateau area, and which caused a lot of biodiversity loss. of course, yesterday Professor Bova said that the dominant species, most of them disappeared. Endemic species also lost as well. So that means habitat of wildlife were degraded too, and also which influeed very much on the local livelihoods. Look, Tibetan people, they are living in headwater area. In the past, they had plenty of water, but now there's like one case from Himalaya country, which is called water tower on Qinghai Tibetan Plateau. The number of water well decreased from 138 in the past to only 8 in 2000. And 80% of inhabitants in the town have to buy water from outside. So this is a very crucial problem. I will not repeat this slide because yesterday Professor Luigi already mentioned that there's kind of eco-migration or eco-resettlement, which also influence a lot on local livelihood. Of course, there's an upstream-downstream relationship. If there's no enough ecosystem services on grassland, the downstream people influenced a lot. So how can we cope with this kind of change? There's two kind of, let's say, strategies. One is risk management and another one resilience enhancement. So I will focusing on resilience enhancement. Now there's a lot of people are questioning on sustainability. So let's talk about resilience. Resilience enhancement is the capacity of social and ecological systems to absorb disturbances and still remain their basic function and structure. This is defined by some scholars. So to understand the adaptive strategies and their functions, a number of questions needed to clarify. What are they? How they work? To what extent? And can these strategies be improved in the light of more current knowledge about global change? How can this be done? So adapt to the climate change is about knowledge enhancement. The local pastoral, let's say, knowledge work for adaptation to be changed are preparedness, mobility, social networks, diversification, clarification, and exchange, and the local specific. So I did some kind of case study across Himalaya region I mentioned earlier. One is in Himachal Pradesh, India. One is Rosawa district, Nepal, and one is in Gansu, one is in Qinghai, China. So I found that in the long tradition, local people use a very good kind of system. It's called transhumancy and the rotational gradient system in 3 sites. When we look at India and the Nepali side, they are very much similar. They move on very high altitude, let's say alpine meadow in summer, and move down to low altitude forestry in winter. This kind of a system. They also did a very good combination of different animals composition. When we look at that left side picture, we can find they combined the yak and yak cattle breeds very much efficiently, because actually crossbreeds that can adapt to the lower altitude much better than yak. So this kind of strategy is used with very long tradition. So in terms of China side, Tibetan Plateau, they do not move to that long, lower elevation, but they still do kind of long routine migration kind of grazing, which is based on the alpine meadow, but still long kind of. And also, I did a very good study in Nepal side. We found the local institution plays a very important role to, let's say, sustainable grassland management. They have the elected body committee to make decisions. They have self-organized association, well-design civil regulations among themselves, and the rules evolved from traditional and reality. That's really cool. So I found that's really important part we should learn from China side, because nowadays we lose this kind of local institution in China because of land individualization, blah, blah. So in terms of climate change, how local people adjust or adapt, they're doing kind of early grazing on the grassland, because Professor Bava and myself found the temperature grazing or increasing. So they need to move up highland earlier than before. So this kind of transition they have. And also, local people worked with scientists like myself as well did a very kind of job and restore the degraded grassland by cultivating perennial grasses. In the past, they actually have some appearances of cultivating the oat, but you know, oat is an annual crop, which may not very good to protect the soil in that area, particularly on the very degraded grassland, which we call black soil, black beach. There's no turf, no soil at all, because it's totally eroded by either overgrazing or global warming or whatever. That turf were totally removed by wind or water erosion. So we need to restore this kind of grassland. So we worked very closely with local people. Local people also accept some of our technical suggestions and did some good job on it. And of course, they did some diversity finds livelihoods, because I mentioned earlier, there's a pressure of population growth. So they do not have enough land to support this growing population. So in one family, maybe they have, in the past, at the beginning of 1980s, they just get a small amount, certain amount of grassland. But nowadays, their kids, maybe they have 3 kids, they will divide this land into 3. So that's a big challenge for them. So they divide their kind of livelihood into other style, like tourists and also kind of migratory work, whatever. So this kind of change there. So what I found from the case study in these 3 areas, in terms of social point of view, collective herding on Qinghai Tibetan Plateau are happening, particularly in Sichuan and part of Gansu province. People come together, and because they have very shortage of land, so they bring the animal together and share their land together. So collective feed production also happening. Public foundation for grazing, cooperation among farmers association in Nepali, Himalaya are found, already mentioned. User groups action for conflicting mitigation in Nepali and Himalaya, India, Himalaya. I would mention there is one policy change in both in India and Nepal. What I found in Nepal, they have very strong policy on community forestry. So a lot of people, they feel very difficult to move down their livestock to grazing in the communal community. So they need to negotiate with the local people by paying fees. So this kind of user groups negotiation happening there to deal with this kind of problem. And also India side, due to the all the grassland were located by the Ministry of Forestry, so they needed to work with the forestry department very closely and solve the problem. So this is kind of a fund. So in order to enhance this kind of adaptive management, what can we do? We needed to do institutional development. Both scientists and policymakers should look at how we can empower local knowledge and integrate this knowledge into our scientific research and also policy making. Because I found local knowledge is a kind of a scientific knowledge, you know. Because in the past, actually, we overlooked this important part, so which is very important. So also, we needed to build very strong institutions for a resilient society. And also, good governance is behind. Because of time limitation, I will not go very detailed. So right now, based on this kind of stuff I learned from Nepal, India, I currently developed a key project funded by Chinese government. I want to do a kind of transect study across whole grassland area in Qinghai Tibetan Plateau, and by looking at how bring social coupled social ecological system into my study by looking at using interdisciplinary study. So I hope in the future we might be integrated all dimensions together and get a sustainable alpine grassland there. With this, I would like to thank the new school for big support. Without this support, I would never go beyond Nepal to India, so which embroidered my study. And also, I would like to Asia Scholarship Foundation, which gave me opportunity to study in Nepal. And also, my government, Ministry of Science and Technology, Ministry of Environmental Protection, Ministry of Agriculture, supported me a lot in terms of financially. And also, I would like to thank my two organizations, Cornell University and Beijing Normal, which provide a lot human and all kinds of facilities to support my study. At the end, I would like to share this picture with all of you. Let's get a Harmony society. Thank you.
So I'm going to introduce you to Victoria Marshall, my colleague at Parsons, the New School of Design, and she's going to talk about designing urban environmental activism.
So my talk is titled Urban Design in Urban Ecology for Calcutta and India and Shaoxing, China. For my India-China fellowship, I want to offer you a design project today. And I'm positioning this project as a contribution to the emerging field of urban ecology. And I'm using comparative examples from two cities in India and China that represent different mixtures of different city models. So to date, urban ecology has been defined mostly by ecosystem scientists and less so by urban designers. So this project aims to rebalance that trend by offering drawing set that critically translates ecosystem science frameworks and emerging city models into urban designs. So urban designers McGrath, who you know, and Shane, my professor, have described three city models: metropolis, megalopolis, and the networked and multiform metacity as competing theories of symbolic form, social order, and environmental metabolism, each with the specific roles for urban designers to imagine, represent, and shape. So for example, the signature architect, the star architect, is the urban actor for the metropolis. The anonymous corporate firm or government firm is the actor for the megalopolis. And the megacity and its slums attract the social scientists, the NGOs, and the global institutions. So my project engages all of these city actors and models and practices. I mapped their interventions and interfaces in the two cities. And this was also informed by my fieldwork for 2.5 years and my research. And also a novel land cover classification called Patch Dynamics, designed by the urban ecologist Stuart Pickett, who we met yesterday, and Mary Cadanasso. And this Patch Dynamics accounts for the heterogeneity of urban environments. And this project then proposes spaces and practices for the meta-city urban ecology. So Calcutta and Shaoxing are located in the two mega deltas whose rivers have their source in the Himalaya. In the Ganges-Brahmaputra river delta, mega delta in India, the urban process of the megacity is the dominant model. It is characterized by the megacity is characterized by significant pressures on people, transit, resources, housing, extreme density, and the absorption of agricultural land brought about by extensive sprawl. The The densely inhabited north-south corridor along the Hooghly River between the Ganges River and the Sundarbans is the largest site for my study. And the local case study is the rapidly changing eastern edge of Calcutta, located where it meets the East Calcutta wetlands. Yeah, we have people from Calcutta here, and the border with Bangladesh. Okay, in the Yangtze River megadelta in China, the urban process that is dominant is the megalopolis. And this is characterized by concerted attempts to avoid the unrestrained growth of slums and informal development that are present in the megacity model. This is why they're twinned processes. So the megalopolis is an extended urban region, and in China, the repetitive and the financially efficient units of the megablock, the mega node, the new town, the mega mall, eco park, high-rise clusters, all connected by high-speed trains and 6 to 8 lane highways are the character of the megalopolis. And the largest scale of my study is the Nanjing, Shanghai, Hangzhou, Ningbo, Z-shaped city. And the local case study is the northern edge of the city of Shaoxing, which is on the southern shore of Hangzhou Bay. Okay, Calcutta. On the eastern edge of Calcutta, urban change, in my analysis, is sequential and invisibly sectional, as the groundwater extraction of the city of Calcutta exceeds the recharge. A newly built wider road called the Eastern Metropolitan Bypass has fostered the conditions that make it economically viable for the landowners to transform ponded and waterlogged dry land on the edge of and in the East Calcutta wetlands. So a new town, an IT zone, new hospitals, 5-star hotels, fancy schools, shopping malls, big box retail, gated high-rise housing clusters, government offices, business headquarters, have all transformed this road corridor into the city's eastern waterfront. In turn, in this mix of old and new and wet and dry, it has fostered in the sequence conditions for newer and also proposed projects of flyovers, light rail, subway extensions, street widening, and sewage canal upgrading. Typically, these projects are not coordinated with each other or add up to any legible, sensible, or as far as I can tell, intelligible final urban image, other than to create the conditions for their continuing implementation. And Vaijanti Rao actually calls this phenomenon infrastructural urbanism. So within the context of this, what I'm describing, open-ended, speculative, and sequential change with no goal, my project proposes an urban intervention that generates a physical, digital, and discursive space for science to interact directly with people. Using readily available satellite imagery and simple handheld sensors, experts in what I call pond neighborhoods create a patch dynamic picture that affords residents a way to imagine change and monitor their own ecosystems, assisted by ecologists who, what we heard yesterday is changing, who are looking for new ways to identify scientific priorities in cities. This adaptive mosaic approach permits a diversity of research questions to emerge from adjacent and quite similar urban patchy landscapes. It also allows for contesting views and practices to coexist. In India, environmental data that measures ecosystem services can then be shared or engaged as leverage, which I understood from NIDI's research, for increased resources or new hybrid partnerships. These pond neighborhoods are in turn located in a larger wetland borderland that surrounds an even larger water body, in this case, the charismatic East Calcutta wetlands, that was recently designated by the Ramsar Convention as a wetland of international importance. The wetland borderland is imagined as this as acting in between the space of no borders and the space of a hard border that is impossible to fix in place. The wetland borderland street life is a space of interaction following what I learned from Dong, a transhumance model that allows a complementary exploitation of resources between highlands and lowlands. So in a delta landscape, in this case, therefore, the lowlands are the wetland, fish farm, recycling, ecotourism landscape on the inside of the borderland. And the highlands are the levy city of Calcutta, just inches above the lowlands. In between, the streets are described and analyzed and changed and monitored in section, in centimeters on the surface and meters below the ground to the groundwater. And in form, they follow the nested pulsations of monsoon rains, rituals, and everyday commuting, each of which today regularly reorganize the city. Okay, Shaoxing. In the northern edge of Shaoxing, urban change is simultaneous and visibly sectional. In Calcutta, it was sequential and invisibly sectional. Grids of megablocks with many bridges are built over the existing water network. At the same time, economic and technological development zones and new towns are phased in as the water villages are systematically shut down and phased out. In my observations, water-based practices persist, such as waterfront vegetable and clothes washing, I think that you just saw, and also fish farming. I also observed the food gardens are continuously replanted on the fertile soil that is continuously seem to be moved around with the heavy machinery in preparation for new office towers, residential buildings, clusters, and eco-parks. In addition, I observed that dredging and shoreline stabilization to accommodate the long-distance cargo transportation is actually increasing. In China, this pattern occurs in many areas, or in the megadelta. This pattern occurs in many areas at once for the past 10 years, and led by multiple 5-year concurrent and coordinated strategic land use master plans. So in the same format I just described for Calcutta, this project proposes an adaptive mosaic approach in order to generate a physical, digital, and discursive space for science to interact directly with people. In China, environmental data can be used for cooperation and co-management. I also learned that from Nidhi, who's speaking next. As the Chinese People's Republic isn't equipped to handle negotiation by direct confrontation. The spatial strategy is as follows. Canal neighborhoods, I call them, are located in a larger, what I call shoreline borderland that runs parallel with the existing high-speed train corridors and long-distance canals. In this case, the canal neighborhoods run perpendicular to the Hangzhou-Ningbo Canal, which is currently being upgraded by the Zhejiang, which is the province, Inland Waterway Renaissance Action Plan from 2000. It's dated 2011 to 2015, so it's just started in what I saw. So this main canal forms the southern extension of the famous Grand Canal, which the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference is currently seeking UNESCO World Heritage status as a property of outstanding universal value. So the shoreline borderland is a new spatial model for urban change that includes and hybridizes Hoku experiments, water transportation, urban food production, and nighttime environment design. It's designed so that it can be expanded in the mega delta, which I drew, in order to generate ideas for change inside the space of the singular official culture, where tremendous work is being undertaken to keep it in place in China. The shoreline borderland is a linear space in which, again, the transhuman model engages the lowlands of the water surface and the highlands, actually, of the farmland, but also high-rise buildings, dwellers. So this section goes this way, not that way. It aims to provide options for people for whom mostly move from their high-rise apartment now to their car, scooter, or bus in order to go to work, shop, study, visit friends or family. It bypasses the road culture, which is the new city being built, and correlates water and train-based movements with the nested pulsations in Hangzhou of winter damp, because it's built below the Yangtze River. There's no heat in winter. Summer humidity, and the golden weeks, such as Chinese Lunar New Year and National Day, each of which today regularly reorganize the city. Similar to Thanksgiving, that just reorganized our country. We have these resortings periodically. So these two linked projects aim to fill out the potential of urban ecology by linking urban ecological systems and new spatial strategies into an iterative loop where data and urban interventions can create discursive and physical spaces for new models to emerge continuously. I think that's the key word. Following an adaptive mosaic and non-equilibrium paradigm, it is a project that acknowledges the open-endedness of ecosystems. It is also a project that aims to generate options that can replace the twinned and unsustainable urban processes of the megacity and the megalopolis, both of which are being actively engaged in what Sanjay framed for me, the advancing state party of India and the retreating party state of China. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, for that beautiful visual treat. The lights have been restored to your satisfaction, Nidhi. I would like to introduce you to Nidhi Srinivas, again, a New School Fellow at the India-China Institute. I don't see Nidhi. Where is he? He's right behind you. Oh, okay. Thank you, Andrew.
this area.
Yeah, either one. And then you might be able to put the whole thing into screen mode.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Nidhi Srinivas. I teach at the New School. I teach courses on management and policy and at NGOs. My interest has always been in social theory, and so what I'm presenting to you will seem a little different from the presentations you've just heard. And so my purpose is to begin by very quickly framing what you're about to see in terms of the larger project that the fellows share. We agreed by consent to affirm our commonalities, but to also assert our commonalities within some level of complementary divergence. And so my presentation is going to be more social theoretical. There's going to be less empirical detail, and I'm going to rather deliberately try to show some vivid images to have us reflect on them. That's my goal. I'd like to signal very explicitly that I share the following among many commonalities with my dear fellows. I have a commitment to local people, in the same way as Dong Shikui does in the presentation he showed you, to the ways in which technologies can unearth in different ways unusual political responses, as Victoria has just shown in her presentation, and especially with Sanjay Chaturvedi's commitment to notions of micropolitics and the ways that landscapes and politics are embedded in each other. I'd like to begin with a quote which many of you will know. If I could just read it out to you. I'm seeking to rescue the poor stockinger, the Luddite cropper, the obsolete handloom weaver, the utopian artisan, and even the deluded followers of Joanne Southcott from the enormous condescension of posterity. These are the opening lines of the Making of the English Working Class, the classic work of English social history. Thompson, of course, is being ironic. He isn't trying to rescue them because he believes they have not yet been destroyed. Posterity here is therefore a word to be taken with some care. The book begins at the cusp of a long, extraordinarily painful cycle of environmental destruction that we are all immersed in. In fact, to some philosophers, it takes an incredible effort to actually imagine the world differently. I don't wish to imply that the Industrial Revolution was all bad. It shaped everything we are, after all, including the PowerPoint slide that I was about to show you, which is now a PDF format. However, I do wish to acknowledge that one way to understand the environment, one way to understand politics, is for us to also acknowledge the people who struggle with it. And I am in no way implying my authority over them, but I wish to be greatly respectful to them. And so what follows are their narratives as I've done my best to understand them. The term social innovation, which has come up in a couple of our presentations, has a specific set of meanings. I'm placing this for those who wish to know those meanings. It typically means new ideas that work in meeting social goals, new concepts, strategies, and initiatives, products and processes or organizations that meet pressing social needs. So one understanding of social innovation is to see it as a set of tools. And if we see it in that way, we can say that the ecological situation we're in today can be dealt with in terms of problems and ways in which certain concepts, practices can be made into tools. I, however, would like to argue that social innovations are not just tools. I'd like to argue that they're actually clusters of practices and that they unleash peculiar trajectories of politics. Let me begin by showing you some images which may give us an indication of them as tools. And before I do that, I want to just quickly give you an indication of the areas I studied. The images you're seeing are images that also evoke the ecosystems. Two areas I especially studied are in Rajasthan and India, Udaipur. As you can see, this is a semi-arid landscape with occasional water reservoirs, such as the one behind the woman you're seeing in the photograph, but it is a rocky, rather forbidding landscape. If you can look, it's a little hard to read, but if you can look up, I've tried to sort of compress a lot of my information into a set of key points. The point 2 indicates the key environmental problems there. These are deforestment, encroachment into government forest areas, as well as depleting water and degradation of existing water sources. The responses are typically through village collectives organized by NGOs. The NGOs also subsidize pumps, and they use this in a way to work with the state, co-management, if you will, to deal with the environmental crisis. A second location that I studied is within China. This is in the part of Yunnan that borders Burma, the Gaoligongshan Reserve, as some call it. This is a semi-humid area with thick, very thick vegetation. It's one of the key areas of biodiversity in the planet. It's suffering from problems of deforestation as well as encroachment. Responses have typically involved empowering communities so that they actually monitor the reserves themselves, increasing different types of income sources so that they don't have to cut down the trees, as well as forms of other cooperation with the government ministries. If I could just quickly signal to you, I was struck by an important difference in my fieldwork in Rajasthan as well as in Yunnan. In Rajasthan, the NGO I studied tried to work with the government but wasn't entirely successful, and in a certain sense operated as a complement to the state. In Yunnan, the NGOs I studied worked exclusively with the government, and in fact, at times it was hard to distinguish what could be called a civil society from what could be called the state. Now, these are some examples, if you wish, of social innovations. Here's one. These are pump sharing groups. The gentleman in the middle is having a register. The register indicates how much money is been paid by each of the members of these groups, and in return, water is released accordingly. This is one of the pumps that has been subsidized by the NGO in Rajasthan. On the left, you have a beehive, which is a modern beehive. You can use it without destroying the honeycomb. Traditional beehives in different parts of the world, when you open the beehive, the honeycomb is destroyed, the bees die, and thus you remove the honey. Here, you can retain the bee comb. On the right, you have an energy-efficient stove, which improves the eyesight of those who've used the wood that's used in the stove, overwhelmingly women, but it also reduces the number of trees that you need to cut to keep such a stove going. All three images you're seeing here are from an area near Udaipur in Rajasthan, and they basically show you how existing water source is being maintained. The existing water source is at the bottom of the three pictures. On the left-hand side on the top, you see a local member of a low-caste community who is a scavenger that is paid by a village collective to take the trash around the water area so that the water is not contaminated. And on the right-hand side, you see an image which is not all that clear, but it says in Hindi, Jal Mandir, literally the temple of water, and the water that's pouring out of that tap is from this restored water source. So here you have, if you wish, a very classic example of a degraded water source that has been, if you wish, improved and could qualify as an example of social innovation. On the left, you have community forest wardens. May I just acknowledge at the extreme right of the image on your left-hand side, my dear friend and colleague, Yang Shuo, who was my translator while I was doing my research in Yunnan. On the right-hand side, you see a person on the left describing a forest use council and the way it functions. Now, at this point, if I were to stop this presentation, I could tell you what you've seen are social innovations. And I could, in fact, perhaps, given my training in management, encourage models of social innovation, and then we could try to find funding for these models of social innovation. And this would be a particularly familiar road I could traverse. It's a road I was trained to traverse, and maybe that's why I don't wish to traverse it. I actually would prefer to step away from this. I would like to go, without evoking Robert Frost any further, the road less traveled. The word social innovation has many meanings, and it is intriguing to recognize how those meanings have changed over time. Social innovation was historically not a tool. It was a phrase used to identify a problem. The problem was the problem of socialism. There were people who were very uncomfortable with royalty, with monarchies. They wanted to band together and fight it. So if you look at this quote, forgive me, if you look at this quote here in the middle, this is the quote by Monsieur Guizot. It's in French. I will read it out in translation in English. All the political parties, all the social innovators, all the passions, all the ideas, all the dreams of these revolutionaries appear in this anarchy. This anarchy that's being described in this quote by Monsieur Guizot from the mid-18th century is the efforts by local French populations to fight for their freedom. If you wish, Monsieur Guizot is basically giving you a commentary on the rupture of the French Revolution. So, social innovation actually originates as a tremendous level of anxiety with the socialist impulses of citizens. So it is particularly intriguing to see how the term has then shifted over time. So if you look on the second of the 3 bullet points on this page, the shifts in meaning have gone from socialism to social reform. Some of the early uses of the phrase in the English language in the United States and in Britain are in terms of social reform. Social adjustments to technological growth. Influential books on technology start to use the phrase social innovation by the 1950s, including, of course, the famous classic books of Schumpeter. And more recently, it has started to become a little debased so that it simply means something new. So what you have is a term that was initially used to be anti-capitalist, that was something to be abjured if you believed in capitalism, and today stands for efforts supportive of capitalism. And in that sense is often used and evoked by influential foundations, underwritten by different types of foundations that I would say live and rely on the existing model of capitalism that we all are part of. Now, the reason I'm signaling this to you is to signal a particular notion of politics. Social innovation, I would argue, is not a tool. It's not a set of tools. It's actually a way in which we name clusters of practices that are responses to the existing world. And the world that I just showed you, in which the beehives, the stubs exist, is a world of declining resources. It's a world where people are trying to make sense of the way in which their markets and societies function. It's a world which some say is dominated by neoliberal capitalism. It may be more correct to say it's dominated by a particular way in which we imagine the market and the state. And I think that may be the wisest way to leave it for some discussion. My purpose in pointing this out is to say, if it is then not about technology and tools in an unproblematic sense, what is political about social innovation? What is it we can pull out from this and sort of identify and say, aha, here's something that maybe both normatively, but also descriptively, is something we can either champion or at least identify. Now, there are various ways I could do it, but I'm going to do it by sharing 2 stories, and I'm going to situate these stories through 2 quotes and images. And this is, I should just indicate, if it isn't obvious by now, that this will also end my presentation, since I do believe I will be running out of time shortly in any case. So on the top of this image, you see a mushroom that was located in one of the villages near Gaoli Gongshan that's often farmed. At the bottom, you see an image of a woman leader in one of the villages near Udaipur. And her hand is outstretched because she's having a rather tense argument. And the gentleman on the top who's showing you the mushroom happens to be a forest warden. And as you will see in the image that follows, he's the same person on the right-hand side on the bottom photograph. And he's also having an argument, though it may not seem that tense. Perhaps the photograph was taken and they were more careful in how they showed the images. So what you have here are 2 images of contestation. The quotes indicate the contestation. The first quote from the village near Udaipur, the gentleman on the left-hand side in that photograph wearing a turban, who's smiling, is saying, "I will part with the water on my land only at the point of a gun. In short, I'm not going to share my water." The image on the right, on the bottom, on the left-hand side, the gentleman who is speaking to the warden is saying, "If you cannot give us more funds, then we prefer to receive no funds because it's causing disharmony in the village." Now, the backstory behind this is that the top image you're looking at is during a furious discussion by village councils. What they're trying to do is trying to establish how they can actually deal with the water resources in the village. The gentleman in the turban has water. He's not willing to share it in the village council meeting. He becomes rather furious and states very firmly, "This water is my right. I don't have to share it." However, because of the insistence of the meeting, and the woman who you may see who's staring at the camera in the back of the photograph, because of her insistence, at the end of the meeting, he did agree to share the water. In short, you have a moment of contestation. You have a question. What is it we have in common? Well, we don't have this water in common. But because of the political effort involved, that moment of contestation leads to some effort at sharing. At the bottom, what is happening is that the equivalent of the Chinese ministry in this area, is telling the gentleman in the Gaoli Gongshan, "We can give you 5 beehives for your village, but we can't give you more." And he says, "Look, if you can give us 5, we don't want any. Because 5 beehives basically means some of us are going to fight with some others. Some of us will get the beehives and will be resented by others. It'll cause disharmony. Give more beehives or just don't give any." So in both images, I would argue, you have a certain visioning of what a community is. You have a certain set of agential work, activities through which you try to define a community. And in both images, these are impelled through existing technological and social innovations. And this leads to what I want to conclude with. I'd say these stories point to a particular kind of politics, and it's a politics of contestation. What is it we think is in common? In short, what is it people who have to share a common resource agree is in common as something they can hold on to as a part of their community? I would argue that because you place them in a place of propinquity, they have forced to come to some level of agreement. But that agreement could happen in all sorts of ways. And what's interesting for me is to see how the inherent antagonisms that emerge in such sharing are dealt with. The second is contradictions, moments of dramatic rupture, moments when a certain narrative just doesn't work anymore. How do you then handle that? What are the ways in which you respond? For instance, how do you respond if you're a forest warden and you're told, thank you for giving us 5 beehives. We know you went through a lot of work with your members of your hierarchy, but we don't want them. They're just not enough. It's better we don't have any at all. Or how do you deal with the moment where a very powerful person in a village council says, no, I don't have to agree with the NGO. I don't have to agree with you people. So I would say these are the aspects of politics that both interest me and that I found in my research. I've deliberately left my presentation unconclusive because I don't wish to give you the impression there is a conclusion. We live in a dire moment. It's a market-friendly setting. Neither India nor China strike me as countries whose leaders have at the moment recognized the tremendous cost to their environment through the way in which they've imagined their industrial growth. I do believe as an Indian citizen, China has been a little more thoughtful in this regard, but I don't believe we have much of a room for optimism. The room for optimism depends on these moments of rupture, and it depends, in my personal view, on the extent we have a commitment to these stories, to the people involved in these narratives of history, so that they do not just disappear, so that if even in Benjamin's terms they are propelled into progress with their face backwards, through the new angels that we can imagine. Thank you very much.